What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, May 10th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions, opinions, and whatever else you want to talk about here. Getting on into the news here, as you know, there's an escalation going on between Israel and Syria. It began immediately after Donald Trump announced he was pulling out of the Iran deal when Israel attacked military facilities near Damascus. Then, of course, yesterday, Israel shelled Quneitra. That triggered a response of missiles coming out of Syria, which Israel is saying were fired by Iranians, but there's no confirmation on that. Then Israel fired back on in, but the point here is Israel's firing the first shot, and of course the corporate media is trying to make it look like Israel's the innocent victim, that those awful Syrians and awful Iranians are just attacking poor, helpless, weak little Israel just out of pure spite, which of course is nonsense. Israel's been in Syria for months now, inflicting all kinds of damage all over the place. Now, the Israeli strikes yesterday used 28 planes and fired 70 missiles. 60 were air to ground, and the other 10 were ground to ground. And apparently, the Syrian Defense Forces shot 70% of them down here. Now, we're in a phase of the battle called the skirmish. You don't just have two armies show up and have at each other. First of all, you have a little military action here and see how the other side responds. You have another little military action, you see how the other side responds. Trying to get a sense of what it's really going to be like when the invasion escalates, and I think that's the phase we're in here right now. Syria, of course, is blaming Israel for a missile strike near Damascus on a military outpost south of the Syrian capital. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call right now from Pete in Florida. Aloha, Pete. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and say something that needs to be said that people should be saying, and you are very close to saying that on your radio show, but religion is an opinion. Let me go ahead and say that again. Religion is an opinion. That's what's going on in the Middle East based on religion, based on an opinion. All this garbage that's going on right now is based on an opinion.
Well, the religion is being used as the excuse. The real issues are, of course, control of territory, control of assets, control of pipeline right-of-ways, control of the oil. But if you tell people that that's what the war is really about, they're going to say, well, we want a piece of the action before we fight. But if you go on out and tell them that God wills it or Allah wills it and you will go to a pleasant afterlife if you fight and die in the war, then you get them to take part in the war for much less cost.
Okay, smart guy. Go ahead and tell me what it's really about then.
We've been saying it for months. It's all about territory. It's all about trying to basically regime change Syria as a stepping stone to regime changing Iran. To basically have all the Middle Eastern oil nations trading their oil only for the U.S. Federal Reserve note. And Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this plan all the way back in 2003, 2004, I think it was. This was all supposed to be over in 2008, which tells you how badly that it's really going. But that's what it's really all about. Control of the remaining oil in the Middle East, control of the pipelines, and most importantly, control of what currency the oil is being traded in. Now, everybody involved in the war, they have their own little agendas as well. Israel wants to keep the Golan Heights. Israel wants to invade Lebanon up to the Litani River. Israel and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates want to remove a regional rival, Iran. And they all got together and said, all right, it's time for a war.
Yeah, but they're doing that based on religion, though, right, Mike?
No, they're doing it based on economics.
Okay, all right. Well, that's reality. But I mean, like when we talk about Donald Trump and he says God bless this and God bless that, and I have to bore myself with all the years about all the Christians in this country talking about God bless this and God bless that. The Jews over there, the Zionists over there in Israel have been plotting this for how many years? 70 years since how many years? Let's get serious about reality here, Mike. How long has it been since Israel was actually established? Since 1948?
We're coming up. We're just days away from the 70th anniversary.
Okay, but what does that mean, though? I mean, because there are people who say, "Well, we've owned it all this time because 2,000 years ago, some schmucks wrote something called a Bible." Okay, and said we owned it all. You know, it's like worrying about Tom Cruise and John Travolta fighting over who this knucklehead is with their Scientology. I mean, it's the same garbage, Mike. That's my point.
Well, I agree with you on that issue. But again, religion is used to control people, whether it is Judaism, Islam, Christianity, or Scientology, or that other one that just came out, Nixium.
Right, and that's it, Mike. It's like, shut the front door, stop believing in all this garbage, stop trying to be polite to people because you might offend them because you have something to say and, you know, they don't like it because their religion is offended. I'm sick and tired of this, Mike. I've called in before. I'm a military veteran, dude, and I am sick and tired of myself and my fellow veterans going out and fighting wars for Israel and for these Zionists, and I'm sick of it, man. I'm done with it, dude.
Well, Israel is part of it. You're also fighting these wars for Wall Street. I'm sure you've heard of Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, right?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever read his thesis, War is a Racket?
No, sir.
Oh, you got to hunt that down. It's available online. And Smedley Butler basically worked his way up the ranks. He was one of the most respected military commanders in the Marine Corps. Always followed his orders, always did his duty, won a lot of decorations. Then when he retired, he apparently looked back over his career and realized that he hadn't really been fighting moral and just wars. And so he penned All War is a Racket, where he basically laid out how some of the wars that he fought were on behalf of these large multinational corporations that just wanted to go into these foreign countries and take over. I suggest you read it because I think that's probably a lot closer to the truth. Israel's just one player in a planet full of very ambitious and greedy entities.
Yeah, and I heard all that. Thanks to Republic, and thanks to you, Mike, because you're a very bright guy. Smedley Butler is, as far as I know, the only guy who's won 2 Congressional Medals of Honor.
Yes.
And the CMH is the highest, but I mean, it's so hard to get that. And the guy has 2 of them. Had 2 of them.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know what to tell you, Mike. I mean, I'm just tired. My biggest thing was saying religion is an opinion, dude. Morality is an opinion. The whole argument that we're making over bombs flying left and right is all about opinions. And I mean, I think you're totally right that we have to worry about, well, you and I can't afford bunkers. We're all going to get 2,000 sunblock effect here real soon here because of these stupid people, dude. That's my whole point. So have a nice day.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Yeah, the real reason behind wars has always been economic. Control of territory, control of assets and resources. The reason the European Christians kept mounting so many crusades against the Holy Land wasn't really about the Holy Land itself, but the assets that it contained, the valuable assets, most importantly, that key choke point on all the trade routes that were connecting Turkey and Europe along with Africa. Because until the advent of really reliable shipping, most trade through that part of the Mediterranean passed through that Holy Land. And there were a lot of tolls that were collected. And that was a huge revenue stream. It was also the main route of the opium trade back in those days. A lot of drugs back there in the Holy Land. A lot of opium. We know that Alexander the Great's troops smoked marijuana. That may be the reason why Jesus couldn't wake his disciples up when the Romans were coming down on him. They'd been partying that night. Anyway, back to the news here. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Max Blumenthal is out there accusing the Israel lobby of basically calling all the shots in Trump's rollback policy on Iran. And everybody's out there screaming that this is discrediting the United States government. It is showing we are untrustworthy. But just to be equally fair, don't forget when Obama tore up Bush's missile agreement. So it's been done before, and it's happened before. Now, over at lowblog.com, they have a slightly different take, and they're basically taking Deep Throat's advice to Bernstein, follow the money. And what this article is basically saying is that Trump's biggest donors, Sheldon Adelson, Bernard Marcus, and his biggest inaugural supporter, Paul Singer, all lobbied for Trump to pull out of the Iran deal. So I'm sure that the Israel lobby had a say in it. The money had a say in it. We, the American people, did not have a say in it. And that appears to be the reality here. Now, the U.S. is already going on out with sanctions. As soon as Trump pulled out of the Iran deal, the original sanctions were put back on. And the U.S. is now sanctioning 6 Iranians who exchanged hundreds of millions of dollars via the United Arab Emirates. And basically, these people are reportedly associated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard. There were also sanctions against 3 related business entities. Now, basically what Trump has done is he's chosen a hard exit from the agreement, and he's sending out the message to all U.S. businesses that are currently operating in Iran. They have a maximum of 6 months to shut down operations and get out. Now, we're hearing that the White House is preparing even new sanctions, but there's a pushback from the European Union. Now, you need to remember that the original P5+1 deal had to be negotiated. And now, of course, Trump is acting unilaterally on all of this stuff. But the European Union is saying they're not going to go along with these U.S. sanctions. They're not going to enforce them. And in fact, they may consider retaliatory sanctions against the United States in the process. So this is going to divide the U.S. and Europe. This is driving a big old wedge down between the U.S. and Europe. Over in Belgium, they're saying the U.S. sanctions against Iran are effectively a sort of Damocles hanging over the Belgian economy because Belgium does a lot of trade with Iran. And all that's going to be undone. A lot of people are going to be out of work. A lot of businesses are going to have to close because they've lost customers or they've lost suppliers. Over at Airbus and Boeing, there are going to be people laid off because of the sanctions against Boeing and Airbus to sell aircraft to Iran. This is really a very reckless thing Trump has done. And he did it apparently without considering the potential blowback. Now, Trump's people are already out there trying to defend him and trying to say, no, this was really a good deal. The deal was never really a good deal, and this was a good thing for Trump to do. And Trump is keeping his campaign promise, which, yes, I will concede on that one. He did say during the campaign that he was going to end the Iran deal, pandering to his Israeli supporters. But it's a Pyrrhic victory. Because the consequences for the U.S., for the U.S. economy, for the European economy, are going to be severe. The consequences for our relations with Europe are going to be severe. And Donald Trump has put us all on a path that leads directly to war. And somewhere between where we are now in Syria and somewhere and Iran, We're going to bang up against the Russians. And I don't think it's going to be pleasant. Okay, now let's see. Over in Iran, the opinion about all of this among the people is that America is being treacherous, which it is, and that Europe is so far being spineless about all of this. Iran was aware that European leaders were trying to keep the U.S. in the deal, but Iran doesn't think they pushed hard enough. Now that Europe is looking at the economic consequences, it looks like they're going to push even harder. But this has not improved the situation. This has not improved the situation at all. Now, as you know, Netanyahu was recently in Moscow on a charm offensive against Vladimir Putin and kept making all these references to the Holocaust and how Iran is the new Nazi Germany, and how Iran has openly stated they have a goal to destroy Israel. Now, first of all, that one's an outright lie. That is the result of a deliberate mistranslation by MEMRI, the Middle East Media Reporting Institute, which is an Israeli propaganda front. And they have a long history of basically taking media from the Middle East and providing free translations to the Western media, translations that are often altered to make the Middle Eastern nations look bad and make Israel look good. And then Netanyahu went and jumped the shark and said Iran wants to destroy another 6 million Jews. So they used that 6 million Jews in World War I, they used 6 million Jews in World War II, and now it's official, they're using 6 million Jews in World War III. Now, over in Germany, Angela Merkel has come on out and said that Europe can no longer rely on the U.S. to protect it. So already we're starting to see this split between Europe and the United States. And she's out there saying it's time for Europe to take its destiny in its own hands, to call their own shots, to stop living in the shadow of the United States. The EU chief Jean-Claude Juncker is saying that Europe must replace the United States as the world superpower. So they're beginning to realize the United States isn't the power that it once was. They don't have the clout, they don't have the influence. It's another sign of our decline. Now, Iran is already dropping hints that if the P5+1 deal with the remaining members in Europe doesn't work out, that they may relaunch a nuclear weapons program in order to forestall being invaded. Saudi Arabia has already announced that if Iran starts acquiring nuclear weapons, they will acquire nuclear weapons as well. And I'm wagering a plugged Turkish piaster that Egypt's going to want to do exactly the same. So Trump just made the proliferation issue a lot worse. Over in Libya, their military chief Haftar is announcing a new offensive to take Derna, which has been under terrorist siege since the overthrow of the country's longtime leader, Muammar Gaddafi, in 2011. Shouldn't have messed around in there. Now, getting over to Asia, Japan is saying they are ready to normalize ties with North Korea if the nuclear and abduction issues are solved. Now, we all know about the nuclear issue. If North Korea denuclearizes, Japan wants to be friends. The abduction issue goes back quite a way. North Korea has admitted that some years ago they actually kidnapped 13 Japanese citizens to train as spies. 5 of them have already returned to Japan, and Japan wants the rest of them back. I think North Korea will do that. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones now to Curtis in Nevada. Aloha, Curtis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. You know, I'm confused. Okay, yesterday we were hearing reports from Wolf himself that it was Iran that fired these missiles. Now, what are we walking it back now? Is it just Syria?
No, they
You
both
know?
fired missiles. They both fired missiles. What was the issue is who fired first, and obviously Israel fired first about an hour after Trump's announcement. But the media is now trying to make it look like Israel's the victim and Syria and Iran are the aggressors.
Right, because I'm looking at some of them today, and they're trying to make it sound like maybe Iran is not really the focal point, which I'm not sure about. Okay, I don't know. I would have to assume that that the whole thing started because of Trump's announcement. So, but I think that if this thing was done and Iran is implicated in this skirmish here, I think I have to give Netanyahu credit. I mean, obviously, I'm not on his side, but what he did was he effectively insinuated himself into this coming negotiations, and in doing that, he bought himself some time, he bought the Golan Heights situation time, and himself from being prosecuted. You know what I mean? He got himself into this. He put himself right into the whole thing between Iran and the United States. What do you think of that?
Oh, I think the issue is a little more complex than that. I mean, there really isn't a clear delineated one side versus the other. What's making the situation very complex is very obviously you have the U.S. and its allies in NATO over here, and you have Russia and China who are pulling together over there. But many of the other players there in the Middle East, they're following their own agendas, and that's what makes the situation so unstable. That's why we see Turkey flipping back and forth so much.
Right, but there will be an investigation. I mean, there will be a negotiation. I mean, Trump didn't say he was completely out. He said that it's going to be a better deal. They're going to renegotiate, and Israel isn't trying to put himself right into this part of it, and that's what the reason why he just went off and did that.
Okay, I see what you're saying now. I see what you're saying now. Yeah. There's two issues here. First of all, Israel was never part of the P5+1. And of course, Israel wants to get in on the new negotiations because they want to dictate to Trump which Iranian weapons are to be removed. And at this point, Iran isn't going to renegotiate. They've already said that. The reality is, back when the P5+1 deal was struck, Iran had already stopped trying to build a nuclear weapon. They stopped trying to build a weapon back in 2003. They surrendered all the paperwork to the Aiea. And so from their point of view, the cost of the P5+1 deal was negligible. They were giving up something they didn't have. But if Trump goes on back and starts talking about the long-range ballistic missiles, Iran is going to dig their heels in, because Iran is seeing how the U.S. will browbeat and arm twist countries to give up their weapons, followed by an attack. And Iran does not want to be attacked.
Okay, they may or may not agree to a renegotiation. I don't know. But once again, this deal that Trump walked away from, if we look at all the players, the ones that negotiated, the ones that put it together, just on that general purpose alone, it has to be investigated, because there's a lot. I understand that I have not found anything regarding an annual payment, but then again, I haven't not found it, and we're not going to see it in the media. It's not going to be there. But if there is some kind of kickback coming, which I think the reason why this cover-up thing was so important is that they're talking about some sources that some of the uranium-1 that was converted to yellow cake ended up as part of the Iranian going to Iran to the operatives that were actually negotiating. They were prosecuting the war in Syria with using ISIS.
Okay, Curtis, a couple of things here. First of all, we covered this already yesterday. The payments that were being made by the United States to Iran after the P5+1 was signed and sanctions were lifted were a refund for weapons that had been bought by the pre-revolutionary Iranian government, and then after the Iranian Revolution, the U.S. canceled the sale. And so the U.S. obviously has to return that money. To be very honest,
right.
your timeline is off, because that whole uranium one issue happened long after all the brouhaha about Iran's possible nuclear weapons program. And under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran is allowed to have yellow cake. The question is, how much do they enrich it, and for what? And Iran has a right to nuclear power plants. They do medical isotopes. It's a big business for them. They make industrial destaticers and other peaceful uses of nuclear technology. Anyway, listen, Curtis, I have to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We have more callers waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go to the phones here, over in Sputnik News, they're reporting on a statement published by the Iranian government on the Iranian government's website that flat out says there will be no renegotiation on the P5+1 deal. It's either accepted, as everybody already accepted it, or it's off. Now, the only way this is going to stay under control is if Europe succeeds in convincing Iran that they're going to take care of them and do business with them. And again, what that means is the U.S. economy will take the hit. Iran is going to sell their oil someplace else, probably to Europe. They're going to do trade with Europe. And all the business that American companies wanted to do with Iran, like buy petroleum, are shut out. And that means that in addition to the already rising gasoline prices at the pump, there's going to be even more of a shortage. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the gas lines. I think this was back in the 70s, or you had to, you were only allowed to buy gas on either odd or even days. They would look at your license plate, the last digit on there. If it was odd, you bought on these days, and if it was even, you bought on these other days. We could see a return to that. So you may want to think about adding a 5-gallon gas can to your prepper kit, and you're also going to have to add gasoline preservative, because gasoline, as it comes out of the gas pump, is only good for a few months. But gasoline preservative, which you can get at any auto parts store, will lengthen that considerably, I think, to somewhere over a year. All right, getting on back to the phones here. Vivian in Canada. Aloha, Vivian. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike, that oil embargo occurred in 1973, and ironically, it was led by Saudi Arabia, who now it has been taken into the fold of Israel with Mohammed bin Salman and his alliance with Jared Kushner. But there's one thing that I question about why Iran would send a missile into Israel. You have to remember there are a lot of Muslims, or into any area near Israel. There are a lot of Muslims within that area.
Yes.
And Israel is aware that Iran would not want to kill masses of Muslims that they would need ultimately as ground forces if they ever succeeded in weakening Israel. The most logical option, and one thing Iranians are by descent, is extremely intelligent and rational. They will choose, as you have pointed out, the economic option, economic strangulation of any economy, of any country that is supporting Israel. And this will, of course, create hostility towards Israel. And I also noticed the fact that Netanyahu is constantly rushing off to Vladimir Putin makes me wonder, what is he trying to do? Is he trying to assure that Russia is not a surrogate for Iran in terms of firing off missiles on behalf of Iran? Is there a deep interdependence between Russia and Iran that Russia might be a surrogate? And then, of course, we can never forget the role of Turkey. Erdogan is very much a dreamer of the old Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
He's just waiting for the right time. And of course, Israel is aware of this. And in preparation for that, they started nurturing India long ago. because India has such a large populace that is hostile to Islam. So Israel started courting India many years ago, if not decades ago, and
Yes.
also the Kurds. The Kurds, even though some of them are Muslims, some of them are still Zoroastrians, and are therefore still hostile to Islam as well. And so that's why, for example, that so-called Halabja attack in 1988, presumably by Saddam Hussein against the Kurds of Mosul, I would wonder if that was not another false flag just to create hostility towards Saddam.
Yes, it was. It was. I know it was in all the newspapers that Saddam had used gas on the Kurds, but the U.S. Army College did their own investigation, and they concluded that the attack had come from Iran. And it was basically retaliation because the Kurds were doing cross-border raids into Iran and causing a lot of damage.
Yes, that makes sense, because I personally thought it might have been Israel. But Iran has a lot of hostility to anyone that is not Muslim.
No, wait a minute. That's not accurate. That's not accurate. Iran has a huge population of Christians and Jews, and the Jews there are so comfortable that they rejected a request by the government of Israel to emigrate. Not everybody is hostile to people of other faiths. The vast majority of people. The vast majority of people get along very well until they are inspired to hate by their leaders.
Well, I know that, having been born in Bethlehem with parents who got along extremely well with Jews, Muslims, and a number of other Christian faiths. I'm aware of that, but I should not have been so extreme in what I said. Islam is very protective of its supremacy as being the last word from God. That is one of the most important things people don't know about Islam. Muhammad was supposed to be the last messenger. Anyone who came after him is a heretic, and that is why the Baha'is and Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, was persecuted so badly by the ancient, during his time, the ancient Persian government. Which is why Israel so gladly hosts the Baha'i Center in, I believe, either Jerusalem. I think it is in Jerusalem.
Yes.
But they're also they're not intolerant of Christianity, but they still believe that Islam is supreme to Christianity. That Jesus Christ was only a forerunner of Muhammad.
Well, every religion thinks. Every religion thinks they're the supreme religion. Judaism certainly does. Christianity certainly does. Both the Sunni and the Shia do. That's a common feature of being a religion, that we've got the one true path to God. So I don't think we should single out Islam for that kind of an affectation, because it's a very common point of view among those who are religious.
Well, yes, but I know enough Muslims that I know that they actually believe that they are the supreme religion. Efforts were made to convert me to Islam to save my soul, because being a Christian was not good enough.
Vivian, you're not listening to me. Every religion thinks they're the supreme religion. Christians do, the Jews do. It's not surprising Islam does. And all religions try and convert people to build their congregations and get more loose change into those collection plates.
Okay, I think we've gone. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take you off track from what I was initially asking, and that is Iran really likely to set off any kind of large, in terms of geographic area, any weapon that is going to have large destructive powers? I doubt it, and I think Israel knows it, which is why they're playing their hand the way they are.
Yeah.
And I think the economic boycott is the more likely option, and I think there will be some countries that will go along. Certainly, Russia will be happy to, because it serves their interest. So would China, and others who seek to be greater economic powers. And I think that's where we have to look. And I think you're wise to advise people to start prepping and stocking up on items. Now, whether it goes out of control, this is always the danger. Nobody can actually control something like a snowball running down a hill. You can't control it after a certain period of time. It may go out of control. And Netanyahu is so irrational, in my opinion, that it's very likely he's going to miscalculate. And all the people around him seem to be equally irrational, or else he wouldn't be getting away with what he's doing. So,
well, there's certainly fanatics here. And the last thing I want to share with you, because we've got another caller who's holding for a very long time on long distance, is Russia has already said they will come to Iran's aid if Iran is attacked. And yes, this could spin out of control. I'm very surprised that Russia wasn't more involved in the recent conflict between Israel and Syria, but I think Putin is standing back until Russian nationals are directly attacked. Then he's going to respond. Anyway, Vivian, we're going to let you go and switch over to Kathleen in Paris. Kathleen, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today? Did we lose Kathleen?
Okay, first off,
oh, there you are.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
I want to say first that I really appreciate Vivian's comments, Vivian in Canada, and I hope she calls in regularly. And, it's possible she sort of answered one of my things I wanted to talk about. Anyway, I get in my box, mailbox, Syriana analysis. It's a channel on YouTube.
Yes.
And this guy said that that the attacks on the Golan Heights this time was absolutely all Syrian. That Iran had nothing to do with it.
Well, that would make more sense to me. But, of course, Israel is screaming that the missile strike yesterday was from the Iranian forces. But there was no confirmation for that whatsoever.
Right. And they just say what they want to, for their own advantage, don't they?
They always have. And it's hardly unique to Israel. The U.S. government does the same. Saddam has nuclear bombs. There was a torpedo in the Gulf of Tonkin. There was a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, and on and on and on.
One of the other things that Vivian was talking about was Bibi Netanyahu sucking up to Putin.
Yes.
And when I saw that, I couldn't get my head around what is Bibi Netanyahu doing in Russia, marching alongside of Putin to pay homage to the unknown soldier. And if he's not doing that, he's holding court in our government.
Well, Netanyahu was grandstanding, and Putin put him in his place with that maneuver with the veteran. Netanyahu went to Russia on a charm offensive. Israel has changed tactics. Only a few weeks ago, they were out there threatening that they were going to attack all the Russian positions if any Russian air defense systems were targeted on Israeli planes. That did not get a response. So then they turned around and said, we, Israel, desire Russia's help to tone down the situation in our part of the world, even as they're launching missiles and shelling Quneitra and so forth and so on. So I don't think Netanyahu got what he wanted. He was out there trying to push all the old buttons. Iran is the new Nazi Germany. Iran wants to wipe Israel off the map. Iran wants to kill another 6 million people. And I don't think Trump bought any of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just seems so strange that he, is supposed to be our best friend. No, they don't want to be our best friend. They want us to be their best friend.
Yes, that's much more accurate.
They can also go on a charm offensive with our supposed enemy, Russia.
Apparently.
Yeah. Another thing that I question, Bibi gets on the world stage saying what he thinks, and Trump gets on the world stage saying what he thinks. Does Assad have a voice? Does he ever get to say anything that...
Well, I'm sure he says an awful lot on Syrian state media, but of course that's not going to be picked up and echoed by the Western media. They're basically building a silicon wall around all these targeted countries, trying to keep contradictory information from getting out. Israel has all but shut off Gaza from getting any information out about the atrocities taking place there. They're pulling their influence over corporate media in other countries to not report on it. Certainly no American corporate media is reporting on it. They're shooting the Palestinian journalists. They kicked out the head of Human Rights Watch. So, yeah, they're trying to control the narrative.
The other thing I thought was interesting was that Iran is getting into cryptocurrencies, and to avoid the central banks. Of course, they don't have one anyway, but I thought I saw that... They do have
a central bank, but it's owned by Iran, and it runs the public currency as a public utility. And that's why the Rothschilds want to get on in there, because they've all but succeeded in entrapping the world into this debt slavery system called private central banking. I think there's only a handful of nations that still do banking the good old-fashioned way.
Right. Well, they may be getting interested in cryptos, too. I saw something about that.
I would not be at all surprised. I'm sure everybody is watching Venezuela right now to see how the petro is going to work on out. But yeah, everybody has realized it's time. It's not just getting away from the central banks. It's getting away from the SWIFT system, which is dominated by the United States. It's just getting away from the U.S. dollar in general. Because the U.S. has been using the U.S. dollar. They've weaponized it. They use that debt that countries have built up, being forced to use the U.S. dollar as a lever for political gain.
If I'm not wrong, it's this blockchain technology that's going to change the world, because blockchain is the technology of all the cryptos. And, there's a thing that I've heard about called a smart contract that you make on blockchain. And that seems that it would, bypass and make redundant lawyers and trust funds and things like that.
Well, I think you should still have a lawyer look at the contract, however it is being handled and signed at both ends. It's basically a way to have people in remote locations conduct business. Blockchain is a great technology. Cryptocurrencies probably can eventually be made to work. But again, the private central bankers, the Rothschilds and so forth, they're trying to find a way to shut it down. They don't want the slaves to escape. Anyway, Kathleen, we're going to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones here. We're going to take two more calls, then we're going to close the lines for a while because I got some news I got to get out. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Hey, you were talking about Rothschild. Did you know Ivanka Trump, before she went out with Jared Kushner, was seeing one of the Rothschilds, Nathaniel Rothschild, I believe?
Yes.
What a coincidence, huh?
Yep.
Yep. So Hey, Mike, on Trump. I mean, do you think he's a con man?
Well, it's certainly starting to look that way, but I think the biggest problem with him, he's turning out to be a weak leader. He's very easy to manipulate. He's very susceptible to flattery. He's obviously giving great attention to the Israel lobby and all of these billionaires, and he's doing what they tell him to do. And that's, of course, not the way it's supposed to work in this country.
Yeah, because you had that gentleman, Wayne, call and say, Trump did a couple good things. Trump hasn't done anything. Like, he got coal miners' jobs back. How many? Where? When? He gave to the industry. Doesn't mean he's there for the little person. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because he's always have a silver spoon in in his hand. I mean, I voted for Trump, but the more I see of what's going on, I think we've been duped, Mike. I mean, it's just how many more chances you're going to give the guy until you say, I give up on this guy.
Oh, I've already given up on him. I'm not expecting any.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah, he's a hideous disappointment, and the only way I'll ever support him in 2020 is if Hillary Clinton runs again.
But I mean, if Trump did like one or two good things, which if you believe he did, legitimately, but what happens if he does one bad thing, like starts a world war? Wouldn't that negate the one or two good things he's done? You know what I mean?
It certainly would, in my opinion. Yeah, absolutely. And Trump, that list of things Trump has done are all relatively minor. They're not the big issues that most Americans voted for Trump wanted, which was, honest elections, Hillary in jail, an end to the wars, vaccine safety, and we're not getting any of it. Yes, he's working on the immigration issue, but the illegal immigrants, for some reason, are still pouring into this country.
Exactly, which, tells me maybe he's just not trying hard enough, And then another thing, remember, he put in all the people around him. He got rid of people, he gets new people, then he gets rid of them. It's, it's like, obviously, you can figure out something wrong with the dude. I mean, it doesn't take a genius.
Here's the issue. Okay, Trump's, and I'm going to have to hold you through the station identification, by the way. Trump's biggest mistake coming into the White House, he wanted to be magnanimous in victory, and he let all the old Obama holdovers stay. And he figured now that he was the boss, they would shift their loyalty to him, which is how it works in the world of business. That's not how it works inside the Beltway. Everybody has got their allegiances, everybody's got compromising connections, and it was those holdovers who first started Trump down the path of appointing people he should not have appointed. All right, we're going to take a quick break for station identification. Dustin, do not hang up. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And we're talking with Dustin in New Jersey and how it is that Trump came to have some real, in our opinion, bad advisors around him. And it began on the day when he went into the Oval Office and decided to allow the Obama holdovers to stay. And they immediately started manipulating him to bring in people who would serve the deep state. And then these advisors were basically manipulating Trump to bring in more advisors that serve the deep state. There is another factor. We had an article about this, I think it was last week, about the weaponization of the security clearance process, because everybody who works in the White House has to have a security clearance. And the more important your job is, the higher that security clearance has to be. And the gist of the article was that by simply denying or delaying security clearances for people Trump wanted, they could keep them out of the White House. So again, Trump is surrounded by enemies, and they're manipulating him and using him. And maybe he's just decided he's cool with being a single-term president because it's going to look really fine on the resume.
Thing is, though, we said before, he ran. He everything he ran on, 99% is not coming to fruition. And I think he should know that by now because of Alex Jones or Michael Savage and the rest of the people that are angry at him. But he did have, like I said, he had ample opportunity to get rid of the people in the CIA and the State Department, and he didn't, and that's his mistake. It's not ours.
He's controlled and compromised. There's no question about that. Of course, Trump supporters are out there saying, well, the major campaign promise he made was to get out of the Iran deal, and he kept that promise. And yes, I will concede that he did, but nobody agreed with it except the neocon warhawks. 2/3 of the American public think it was a bad idea for Trump to have pulled out of the deal. And
how's that making America great again, Mike?
That number is going to go up. Let me get a thought in here. 2/3 of Americans think that Donald Trump was wrong to pull out of the Iran deal. That number is going to go up when the economic backlash hits us, when all those workers at Boeing lose their jobs, when the prices at the gas pump start going up, when American companies that were doing business in Iran start closing their doors and letting their people go, then that number is going to go up.
Yeah, because Boeing's a big thing.
Yes.
I mean, people don't realize pulling out of this, you just stuck Boeing. You gave Boeing the middle finger.
Yep.
We don't make much, but Boeing, we make good airplanes for the most part. Maybe not the F-35 and the F-22 per se. They're not, obviously the F-35 is nowhere near manageable. But,
that Dreamliner had its issues when it was first launched as well.
It's just a shame. Like, this is what Mike, I think the next person we get for president's got to be right out of kindergarten because they're not been compromised yet.
I think
because it seems like everybody we vote for, Mike, is crap.
Yep.
It's like we got Dumb and Dumber or Evil and Eviler.
Well, we learned why in 2016 when we saw the Democratic National Committee basically just get rid of any candidates that wouldn't support the deep state. They cheated Bernie Sanders out of that nomination. They openly admit it. Pelosi came on out and said she doesn't see anything wrong with the party leadership choosing the candidate, which makes a mockery of the whole primary process. Remember when Donald Trump first set foot on the stage, the RNC was out to get rid of him. They did not want him at all. And they were throwing all these other candidates in there to try and just dilute him and get him out there. They even put Ted Cruz in there, who wasn't even eligible to run for the office of president. And in the end, because the American people wanted a true outsider, they voted Trump through the primaries, and then they voted him into the White House. And I'm sure they're all very disappointed because he went from being outsider to insider in 5.2 seconds flat.
And Mike, real quick on Syria, the Syrians would have shot at the outpost in Israel. Of course, we know all Israel is the dirty trickster. So
yes.
False flag, definitely, because they look at what they've been doing the last couple of days. You just got to follow their past, their past job performance there, and then you see the future, Mike. That's what I see, because it's not going to stop now. It's going to be like this.
No, this is just the beginning.
Start.
This is the beginning. This is the skirmish phase. I think what Israel and the U.S. have realized is that they have to do this now before the anti-war fever builds any higher, both in Israel and the United States. Because, pretty much everybody I talk to, and we have a lot of military here, pretty much everybody I talk to, they're saying, this is a bad idea. We're getting into a mess, and it's a bad idea. So people are really getting fed up with it. Anyway, Dustin, thank you for the call. We're going to let you go. And before we take our last call, before closing the lines here, story just broke over on Fars News, where a Syrian lawmaker came on out and confirmed that the rocket attack on the Israeli military in the Golan was conducted by Syrian's army and not by Iran. So the claim that Iranian forces attacked Israel is an absolute, complete, flat-out lie. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And let's go back to the phones to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, yes. Mike, what you just said was confirmed this morning by a reporter from Syria on Fault Line with Stranahan, and it's a show on Sputnik News. Stranahan and Nixon. So I just want to ask, I just have a funny feeling. I didn't realize until I saw your website yesterday that Netanyahu was in Moscow for that celebration.
Yep.
I have a feeling, Mike, that there was an agreement. The agreement, I believe, was Putin said, look, as long as you keep the United States out, go do what you got to do, You think you can take these people on, go right ahead. Try, And the reason I tell you that, I say that, because as long as you can convince the United States, I think that's what he told Netanyahu. Now, what that would do, let's say Israel and Iran go at it full bore. Saudi Arabia is going to get involved, of course.
Yes.
So is Syria. All right. This would lead, at some point...
And the United Arab Emirates, they're going to wade on in, too.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And possibly Turkey. At some point, the Strait of Hormuz would be closed down, okay, either from too much firepower or maybe a few sunken ships or whatever. The Saudi oil fields, many of them, if not most of them, would probably be destroyed. And the same thing with the other Emirates, okay? So who would be making out if that happens? As long as Russia's not involved, Russia would have be sitting pretty as far as their oil goes. The other thing I want to ask you, though, is how about they keep saying that we're now self-sufficient in oil because of the fracking and all that. What do you think? Is this BS or is it really true?
Well, it's the fracking hasn't produced the volume of product that was originally expected, but there's been a lot of conventional drilling authorized along the coastlines and up around Alaska, and our total oil and gas production is now pretty close to what Saudi Arabia is doing. How long it will last, of course, is not really known.
So wouldn't you think that would keep the prices down? As a matter of fact, it should be keeping the price down already?
No, the oil companies want the prices to go up. Saudi Arabia needs $88 a barrel oil to balance their government budget. And you'd be surprised how much of the oil harvested here in the United States is actually sold to other countries. Most of the oil from up around Alaska gets sold to Japan, for one thing. So, it's all about the money and all about the profitability.
We were told, I remember when they said, well, we're going to really be self-sufficient. As a matter of fact, Trump himself said that when it comes to oil and all that.
That was part of the selling point. That was part of the selling point to get people to go along with seeing more oil rigs off the coastline or in their backyard, and to be quiet about more pipelines being built across very delicate lands. We're going to be self-sufficient. No, it's just all about getting more of that oil out of the ground and getting it to market. The last time oil prices went down, it caused a lot of damage. It certainly didn't help Venezuela. It didn't help the United States. A lot of the fracking companies actually went out of business, and it did more harm to the U.S. and Venezuela than it did to Russia.
I don't like fracking either. I think it's dangerous to the water, the groundwater, and it's dangerous as far as earthquakes go. It's really,
absolutely.
I think it's my own opinion, But do you agree what I was saying about Russia? That Russia would be sitting pretty if this happens, provided they in the United States don't get into it. If that happens, like I said, all bets are off.
Well, here's the problem with that. Putin knows that Israel has nuclear weapons, and that if the U.S. stays out and Russia stays out and Israel goes after Syria and Iran itself, again, same situation. They're running out of weapons. I mean, yes, the U.S. is sending them all the bombs and bullets they could possibly want, but we could get into a situation where Israel goes ahead and deploys a nuclear weapon. I think what Netanyahu wanted was to just get Russia to stay out of the situation, but I'm not seeing any of the Russian forces leaving Syria yet.
Well, in that respect, I'm saying that might have been part of what they were talking about. Putin might have said, look, you go nuclear, you're done. Okay? We have a heck of a lot more nukes than you, and you're one little country. He might have told him something like that. But if you want to go at it with Iran, go right ahead. As long as the U.S. doesn't say, I'm not saying.
I don't think so. Again, because Russia and Iran are major trading partners, and Putin really doesn't want to lose that. Putin, throughout all of this stuff, has been the voice of calm and reason, and so he's not going to be encouraging anybody to go to war with anybody. Netanyahu went to Russia to try and get Russia to cooperate with Israel to resolve the situation, meaning help Israel basically conquer Syria and so forth. And Putin told him flat out no. And we know this because, Netanyahu tried to grandstand, get up next to Putin in that military parade, which was very impressive. And then Putin pulled that veteran in and put the veteran beside himself, forcing Netanyahu to step away and back. And if you look at the look on Netanyahu's face, he is not a happy man. He does not look like a man who got anything that he wanted from this trip to Moscow. That's what I think.
Do you think Netanyahu's that stupid that he would think that Putin would go along with him, as far as the way you put it, that he just back
It's
out?
chutzpah. It's chutzpah. Yeah. Netanyahu, basically, I guess he's so used to getting everything that he wants from the United States government that he just figured he could fly on over to Russia and get whatever he wanted from Putin. And that must have been a rude wake-up call for him.
That's unbelievable. I mean, he wasn't even getting everything he wanted out of Obama.
Well, he's getting everything he wants out of Trump now.
That he is, and it's disgusting, and it's scary what's going on, because we're in a brink. That's all I can say. We are in a brink.
Yes.
And I just know we're going to go with this. It's also possible that Iran has nukes already.
I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that simply because, Iran was overflown with all kinds of sensing aircraft. The Aiea is in there. There are cameras in all of their nuclear facilities. The Aiea acknowledges that Iran quit trying to build a nuke in 2003 because things were kind of calm back then, and they didn't think they were really going to need one, and they wanted to invest the money in the civilian infrastructure.
Yeah, but they could nukes too. They could buy them from China, if not from Russia. They could even buy them from the United States in the black market or something. I mean, that's how Israel got their nukes, right?
Well,
killing uranium.
Yeah, they stole the uranium from the United States, and Israel, which has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, has been caught selling nuclear weapons to other countries, the former government of South Africa. Now, under the terms of the NNPT and the IAEA inspections, here's why it's going to be very difficult for anybody to buy a nuclear bomb from another country. And that is because the arsenals of every country are cataloged and listed in the information held by the IAEA, and every once in a while they go back in and they do a count. And if the country comes up short, they'd better have a really good explanation of where that nuclear warhead went.
Okay, I get it. So even we're subject to that, the United States?
Yes, of course. Now the
Israeli,
the Israelis aren't. The Israelis still will not officially acknowledge they're a nuclear power. The one fly in the ointment, as far as the U.S. is concerned, is that very strange air mission out of Minot Air Base back when we were just starting to really whoop on Iraq. And the story goes that an aircraft departed Minot with 6 live nuclear weapons on the wing pylons, which is not how you transport nuclear weapons. You don't put them on the wing pylons unless there's a possibility you're going to use them. And part of the story is that somebody in the administration may have given the authorization for a nuclear strike on Iraq, and then it was basically called off as really not being a good idea. But apparently when the plane came back and actually landed on a second airbase, there were only 5 of the weapons still on the wing pylons. Nobody knows where the 6th one went, and the flight crew died under suspicious circumstances shortly thereafter. So we don't know what's out there. Again, anybody who can get the weapons-grade uranium knows how to build a bomb. It's very, very easy.
I guess all we can do is pray for the best right now.
Well, right now we could use a really large asteroid on Tel Aviv. And I hate to say it because Washington, D.C., and I hate it because I still want to see my ancestors' signature on the Declaration of Independence someday. And there's a lot of really cool museums in Washington, D.C., such as the Smithsonian Air and Space, and some of the stuff I worked on back at NASA is on display there. And I got to tell you, you have no idea how old something like that can make you feel.
The other hope is that maybe space aliens are really going to do something to stop it. Supposedly, they've interfered already in nuclear bases in both the United States and the old Soviet Union before. So I don't know if I believe that or not, but, we can hope to pray for anything.
Well,
miracle from God himself.
I'm absolutely convinced that the universe is full of intelligent life. The place is simply too big for it not to have happened. I just don't see a reason why any advanced civilization capable of interstellar travel would have any interest in us. We have nothing they need, nothing they want. It's less than a 1% chance they could visit our planet without full environmental suits. And to use my favorite analogy, When you're driving down the freeway in your car, do you stop and get out and visit every anthill that you pass?
No, but those ants don't have nuclear weapons. A lot of people say that what started getting a lot of interest, the aliens into us, were after World War II, and that's why that ship at Roswell, supposedly was there, because that was our main nuclear base at the time. The only problem I have with all of that is they say so many of these crafts have crashed. They had one in Missouri crashed a few years before that.
All right, Mark. We're getting into a very questionable territory. First of all, you need to understand a couple of things. What crashed in Roswell was actually a high-altitude sensing balloon that was looking for evidence of radiation from Soviet nuclear tests. And they made up the story about the flying saucer basically so that the Soviets didn't realize they were being spied on from that far away. And you need to understand the U.S. military has actually fanned up all this UFO nonsense as a cover for the development of black project aircraft. So when somebody's out there driving across the desert and they see $1 trillion worth of taxpayer funds whip overhead, they're going to run to the next town and say, I saw a flying saucer. And they're not going to think about that little hangar and that little airfield off in the distance.
All right, I'm just pointing out certain things. I don't say I believe it or I don't believe it. All I know is that there are,
we're trying to keep the show grounded in reality, and I don't think Earth's nuclear weapons are a problem for alien civilizations because we can't get them anywhere yet. Yeah, we can blow up our own planet. We might be able to send a nuke to the moon. For what reason, I couldn't possibly say. But we certainly are not a threat to any alien worlds with intelligent civilizations out there. We're centuries away from that kind of situation. All right, Mark, we're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines, and we're going to be back with more news after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Welcome back to reality. And apparently Russia has completed the delivery of the first regimental set of the S-400 air defense missile to China. Apparently a third ship carrying missing support equipment has arrived at its port of destination. China will begin the acceptance procedures at the end of May. So they now have a regiment of the S-400 missiles, probably not the last. Now, do you remember we had these multiple incidents of U.S. warships just clanging into commercial shipping out here in the Pacific? And one of them was the USS Fitzgerald, and the junior lieutenant in charge of navigating the USS Fitzgerald when it collided with the commercial vessel pleaded guilty to dereliction of duty and acknowledged her role in the deaths of 7 sailors last year. Lieutenant J.G. Sarah Kopik cried during her court-martial. She was sentenced to forfeit half of her pay for 3 months, an additional month on top of the 2 she forfeited. She also received a letter of reprimand. That's not a particularly stiff punishment, although the letter of reprimand could take her off the command track. And during the court-martial, she said, not a day goes by where I haven't thought about what I could have done differently. There's nothing I can do now but take responsibility, which is kind of an odd statement because do you remember after both of these incidents happened, the net was just being flooded with all this stuff about how these commercial ships were being used to attack U.S. warships, that it couldn't possibly be the Navy's problem, that these very expensive container ships and tanker ships were being willingly sacrificed to dent the sides of these U.S. warships. And it was all nonsense. And it's another reminder, propaganda is big business here in the United States. Now, Haspel has been confirmed, and I'm hearing now that Ray McGovern, when he was tackled and thrown to the ground by the Capitol Police, and we're talking about a 78-year-old guy, that he seriously injured his arm. And I'm trying to get in contact with him, get him on the show, and find out exactly what happened from his own mouth. So ex-CIA officer John Kirikow, who's a whistleblower, is saying that the pick of Haspel is the single worst pick in D.C., and saying it's insane to have this person who oversaw the torture program in charge of the CIA, and that everything that she's saying inside her confirmation hearing was just to get confirmed. A lot of people were very upset that she refused to say that torture is immoral, and that is a red warning flag to me. And Kuriko basically pushed back on the feminist side of this. You know, it's time for a woman to head the CIA. And Kuriko says, yeah, after 70 years of leadership by white guys, it's time for a woman, just not this woman, which is very similar to what I was saying during the Hillary Clinton campaign, when I'd get all these emails and phone calls saying, you know, it's time for a woman president. And I say, I don't have a problem with a woman president. I have a problem with this particular person being president. All right, let's turn to a little bit more here of the domestic politics. Judicial Watch has released new emails from the Department of Justice showing that former FBI Director James Comey was advised by FBI officials in May 2017 to consult with Special Counsel Robert Mueller prior to testifying before any congressional committees regarding the Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election and his firing as FBI director. Can you say collusion, children? I knew you could. So, according to reports, Comey met directly with Mueller previous to his June 8, 2017 testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Sources said that Comey's opening statement and subsequent testimony were coordinated with Mueller. Now, at the hearing, Comey did reveal he had intentionally leaked material from a memo allegedly documenting a meeting with President Trump in order to help assure the appointment of a special counsel. Now, Comey's leaks were unauthorized and they contained classified information. That's a Title VIII violation. But the important part of the story is the documents released by Judicial Watch are the first to reveal that high-ranking FBI officials helped Comey coordinate his testimony with Mueller. Cover-up, deception, fraud. Now, Mueller is still dealing with these recent court rulings against him, and basically the attitude coming from judges to basically put up or shut up. Judges are threatening to throw all of his cases out of court for insufficient evidence. And adding to his woes, Mueller's biggest media event was the indictment of 13 Russians for collusion. And now the Russians he indicted have pled not guilty, and they're demanding a trial, something Mueller never thought he was going to have to actually go through. So he's on another situation where he may not have the evidence to back up the indictments. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And over at Stormy Daniels, and I don't know why we're still paying attention to her, but there's been a huge goof because Stormy Daniels' lawyer came on out with accusations against Michael Cohen regarding what appeared to be questionable payments. And he basically got this list of financial transactions that involved Trump's lawyers and a Malaysian company, actuarial partners, and a bank in Toronto. And he got all the payments records from these institutions, and he went down and he simply pulled out everyone that said Michael Cohen. But it's a huge goof because Michael Cohen is actually a very common name. And at least two of these accusations are referring to a totally different Michael Cohen with absolutely no connection to Donald Trump. So it's basically undermined the entire credibility of the accusations. And it shows he's not being careful. None of them are being careful. They're just out there lobbying at Trump and his associates. And I have to wonder why they're still doing that. Trump is giving them pretty much everything that they want. So is it out of spite that he beat Hillary Clinton? Is it because he's not in the club? He's not skull and bones? But we're seeing the federal government literally in a state of fragmentation here. Now, Nancy Pelosi was being interviewed by Politico for their Playbook Live event. and she was asked about the Democrats' plans to confront Donald Trump once they won power. And the interviewer mentioned rolling back the tax cut bill and raising taxes. And Pelosi basically said the suggestion Democrats want to raise taxes is accurate. Now, I don't think that's going to play very well when she comes up for re-election. Right now, the polls are basically neck and neck for November, and apparently the GOP is pleased with the primary results so far. And as much of a disappointment as Donald Trump has been, I think people are just fed up with liberal Democrats and all the nonsense. And I think they were just turned off by what we learned about the 2016 election season. Okay, now, article coming out of Investment Watch blog, and it's talking about the links from Robert Mueller to Hillary Clinton. And it starts out basically discrediting the claim that Robert Mueller's Russia investigation against Trump is unbiased, but a cursory look at his team proves otherwise. Every single one of his prosecutors are registered as Democrats. It's hard to find a justification for that. And Robert Mueller added a new member of his team as a prosecutor. The Democratic trend continued. Uzo Asonye is an assistant U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia and was added to Mueller's team as a prosecutor working in the case against former Trump chairman Paul Manafort. Now, Asonye is no doubt excited about her new job, as federal campaign reports show that she most likely has an axe to grind with Trump. In 2008, she donated nearly $1,000 to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. So at this point, it's obvious the case against Manafort has partisan origins. This is a bought and paid for hit squad. Now, the Department of Justice is still stonewalling Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch is having to sue to get the FISA court transcripts about what exactly happened. How was the Clinton DNC dossier, how was it used to get the warrant for the surveillance of the Trump team? And these are records that are supposed to be made available. They're public records. There's nothing classified in a FISA court transcript. But the Department of Justice is still stonewalling as hard as they can. If that warrant was based on false information, then all the evidence collected with it is invalid in a court of law. By the way, John McCain has now admitted he was the one who gave that ginned up dossier to James Comey. So this whole Trump witch hunt is falling apart, and I'm glad. And I'm glad not because I'm a particular fan of Donald Trump anymore, but because I still see this as a nation of laws governed by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and I don't think we should be tolerant of unethical, immoral behavior by anybody inside the government. It's been about a month since the House Intelligence Committee officially ended their probe into alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election. And a week ago, they released an unredacted version of their report that revealed more lies told by top FBI officials. So the Democrats are trying to fight back. They're trying to find something else where they can keep the story of collusion going. And they've gone back to that idea that Russian interests bought more than 3,500 Facebook ads that swayed the election of 2016 in Trump's favor. And they're just out there saying, we have the ads. It's like McCarthy's, I have a list of names. But when you actually look at the ads, they don't support Trump. Some of them actually support Hillary. A lot of these ads supported progressive causes like Black Lives Matter and gay rights. So it's another nothing burger. Okay. A while back, actually 2013, while Hillary Clinton was getting ready to run for president in 2016, there was a scandal at the State Department in which there was this State Department official, a high-ranking State Department official, in fact, an ambassador, and he was caught up in a sting operation looking into a far-reaching pedophilia ring. And that was a huge scandal. An ambassador caught up, he's a pedophile. And then the story just went away. Never appeared in the media again, no charges filed, no punishment, no justice, nothing. How high up did that order come from to just shut it down? Did it come from Hillary Clinton? Did it come from Barack Obama? I think it's a legitimate question. And again, don't they vet these people before they're allowed to hold these positions? The last thing you want to do is have an ambassador in another country that is behaving like this. It discredits the entire nation. Now, here's an article that came out of the Daily Bell, and it says that according to the 2016 American Customer Satisfaction Index, the federal government ranks among the bottom of all industries in the United States in customer satisfaction. You can imagine my shock. I'm not satisfied with the federal government. I think we need a cash for clunkers program for the federal government. We take our current bloated, wasteful, inefficient government, we take it over to the junkyard, we put it in a little mash-up machine, we turn it into a steel coffee table or whatever it's made of, and then every American gets a check for $20,000 with which to buy a new, smaller, more responsive, more efficient government. Now, here's a positive story, not about Donald Trump, but about Melania. Do you remember back when the Obamas were in the White House and Michelle Obama had a staff of 16 people working under her, being paid a combined $1.24 million? Now, that's a lot of people working for a lady who doesn't actually have an official position. There is actually no official position of First Lady. It's a courtesy term. But Michelle had them 16 people. Melania has just 4. And she's refusing to hire any more, saying that she and her 4 people are up to handling the workload. So that's a positive right there. Certainly a little less imperial of a first lady. Now, Forbes just released their list of the most powerful people in the country, and in the world rather. And Xi Jinping, the Secretary General of the Communist Party in China, took first place. Forbes considers him the most powerful man in the world. Vladimir Putin came in second. Donald Trump came in third. So even Forbes sees the United States as in decline. Getting into the economic news here, with Trump's sanctions on Iran, we're going to see a surge in gold demand in Iran, where they're going to be very leery of the paper currency. They're going to want hard assets for the same reason you're all getting into hard assets. That, of course, will put more upward pressure on the price of gold. So if you have gold, hang on to it. The price is going to go up. And yes, we know that the bankers are trying to keep the price down so that they can acquire more gold themselves, discourage people from emptying their bank accounts and their stock portfolio and getting into the metals. But at some point, they're not going to be able to keep it down anymore if there's enough upward pressure. We know that mining output is in decline. We know that demand is up in a lot of areas of the world, not just Iran. Russia and China are buying gold like crazy. It has to go up at some point. It would have gone up a lot before now if it wasn't being rigged, if we weren't being cheated by our own economic government system. Now, Trump's Iran deal exit is forcing the European Union to basically deal with the reality of the United States as the economic policeman of the world. They're all beginning to realize that the U.S. hegemonic domination of the economy based on the Federal Reserve note is a powerful tool for control of the world. And they're starting to say that's not a good idea, mostly because the EU doesn't want to go along with the sanctions on Iran. And the U.S. is already out there threatening sanctions on them. So basically, Trump's violation of the P5+1 deal has left international companies doing business in Iran vulnerable to the extraterritoriality of U.S. law, which enables Washington to punish foreign companies operating in Iran if they have business dealings with the U.S. or using dollar transactions, and right there is a good reason to stop using the dollar. The dollar is no longer king. It's a major player in the global economy, but it's not the dominant one any longer. Another article, this one is out of Zero Hedge. The American dream is dead. We've been seeing it in its death throes now for about 2 decades. And it starts out saying that one of America's founding myths is of the self-made man, the idea that with enough work and dedication, anybody can climb the social ladder and become wealthy, or at least better off than their parents. Well, that's nonsense. The younger generation now has a much worse lifestyle than their parents. I have a much lower lifestyle than my parents had. And data is showing that the most important drivers of one's success in life are determined right at birth. Most of the people who are poor not because they did anything wrong or they're not willing to work, but because they made the mistake of being born to the wrong parents. According to Michael D. Carr, an economist at the University of Massachusetts, no matter what your educational background is, where you start has become increasingly important to where you end. Now, the reality is that despite all the talk about equality of opportunity, it doesn't really exist. We live in a profoundly unfair society of money junkies, and it is getting worse every single year. The wealth inequality in this country is at dangerous, dangerous levels. Over at Tesla, they're still trying to get another loan of $1.8 billion, and the bank creditors are going on a collateral grab. And they've forced Tesla to add its Fremont manufacturing factory to the pool of assets which secures Tesla's loans. So they're getting very, very nervous. I would really hate to see that company go out of business. I like the Tesla. I've seen them up close. I haven't driven one. And I do think electric cars are going to be the wave of the future. When Claire and I were shopping for a replacement for our stolen Honda, we looked at electric or hybrid vehicles. We just couldn't even begin to afford them, unfortunately. BT, which used to be a British state monopoly, is getting ready to chop 13,000 jobs over the next 3 years and will shutter its current London headquarters under plans to wring out £1.5 billion in costs and boost its flagging share price. It's one of the ironies of the stock market. When a company dumps assets and fires staff, their stock price goes up. It's very predatory. It's very short-sighted, by the way. Now, Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen, when she was testifying on Capitol Hill, was basically attacked by Democratic Senator Patty Murray, who basically came on out and said that Nielsen's opposition to illegal immigration was simply her opinion, her political philosophy. And Nielsen fired back saying, no, it's not a philosophy, it is the law. And she's absolutely right. There are already on the books laws against what these open borders people are doing. And I know Trump wants to build his wall, but all he needs to do is start enforcing the existing laws. Anybody who is employing or transporting or giving shelter to an undocumented worker or illegal immigrant or whatever you want to call it, to be politically correct, should be charged, sent to court, sent to jail. If you cut off that economic incentive for the illegals to come here, they'll stop coming here because nobody's going to want to sneak across that border and deal with the reality they're not going to be able to make any money. They're not going to be able to feed their family. They're not going to be able to pay rent. It's out of control. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as you know, there is still a lot of turmoil in Great Britain regarding the Brexit. And Theresa May is being viewed as making too many concessions to the EU as part of the deal. One of them has to do with what's called the Customs Partnership Plan. And analysts have looked at the numbers and realized it will cost Britain £60 million a week. And of course, the EU is desperate to keep getting money out of Great Britain to prop up the rest of the European Union, because Germany's not going to want to carry that load all by themselves. Now, the Duke of Wellington, who's the ringleader in the House of Lords, who's trying to reverse Brexit, it turns out that he gets huge European Union land subsidies for his vast country estate. So that's why he wants to stay in the EU. It's personal greed. It's not a matter of principle. He doesn't want the goodies to go away. Okay, yeah, another variation on the theme. Over in Italy, two opposing groups of Italian Eurosceptics have now decided to join forces. And that means Italy's on the brink of a new radical government as the diehard Eurosceptic leaders Matteo Salvini and Luigi Di Maio reveal significant progress has been made to the composition of a new executive. Obviously, in Brussels, this is not being viewed in a positive light. It's a nightmare. And you've got Italy straining at the leash. You've got Hungary straining at the leash. The EU experiment is coming to an end. And I'm sure George Soros is just angry as all heck because of all the money he's poured into his dreams of a one world government, one world private central bank. But people are pushing back at it, both because of the predations of the European Central Bank and the destruction and crime that the refugee crisis has brought with it. Now, the European Union is following the lead of the United States, and they're now starting to mandate huge numbers of vaccines for the people of the European Union. And they're basically ignoring the concerns of citizens and even municipal authorities that they need to be careful. Remember, a lot of the adverse effects of Gardasil were first reported in the European Union. But EU wants a new vaccine law that will erase any remaining ability for citizens to weigh the risk versus benefit information and make vaccine decisions for themselves. They just want to stand up there and say, stick the needle, stick the needle, stick the needle, stick the needle, stick the needle. And the reality is, the more vaccines are added to the vaccine schedule, the worse the infant mortality rate gets. More about this when we come back from station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And we're going to go ahead and open the phone lines again. I still have a lot of stuff in the talking points, but I can take it into tomorrow if I need to. And a reminder, the lovely Lady Claire will be with us in hour number 3 tomorrow. So we're talking about this very shocking realization that the more vaccines are added to the mandatory vaccine schedule, the worse the infant mortality rates get. And they make an interesting point here. Prior to contemporary vaccination programs, crib death was so infrequent it was not even mentioned in infant mortality statistics. And then in the 1960s, when several new vaccines were introduced and recommended, then all of a sudden you started seeing what was then called sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. And 2/3 of the babies who had died from SIDS had been vaccinated against diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, toxoid prior to death. Of these, 6.5% died within 12 hours of vaccination, 13% within 24 hours, 26% within 3 days, and 37%, 61%, and 70% within 1, 2, and 3 weeks, respectively. We are living in a society in which products are being sold that are actually harmful. But as long as they make money, and as long as the companies that make these are very generous with their financial support of the candidates, it's going to continue. This is the ultimate expression of what fascism is. Corporate greed and government authority aligned together against the general population. Now, the way this country was originally set up, the government was supposed to act as an arbitrator. They were supposed to sit in the middle, balancing the needs of the general population, safe products, against the greed of the populations, the greed of the corporations, rather, who wanted to sell unsafe products. And we've lost that. We keep finding out all these government agencies that are supposed to be looking after our safety aren't doing it. They're being used as sales tools for these corporations. Oh, yes, I'm a government agency. I'll tell you that this stuff is safe. Do you remember all the parents who lost their children to sudden infant death syndrome, and rather than acknowledge there was a problem with the vaccines, they were charged with shaken baby syndrome? Some of these parents, after the trauma of losing a baby, were sent to prison. That's how ruthless the corporatocracy has really become. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. You mentioned Ray McGovern earlier.
Yes.
This morning on Democracy Now!, there is a videotape of what happened to him. Apparently, when the Capitol Police escorted him out of the hearing room, they took him into the hallway, threw him to the ground. His shoulder was injured. He was yelling and screaming. His glasses were thrown off his head, and they were about to step on it until he said, don't step on my glasses. And he was just yelling and screaming. And after they put the handcuffs on him, he was taken to jail, and he was told he's going to stay there for 24 hours, and which is very unusual, and that's what happened.
Well,
and you can watch the videotape.
Yeah, well, we posted the videotape to our website yesterday.
Okay.
This is a 78-year-old man, and my understanding is he actually dislocated his shoulder. And if that does not get looked at medically, even for just 24 hours, it could lead to some serious permanent issues. Claire has to deal with that.
Right. And it's really kind of sad. Like you mentioned, he's 78 years old. He was not resisting, but yet and still these thugs, are abusing him in the Capitol hallway.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that say about this country? Not a lot.
It says we've gone fascist, and the police are proof of it.
So, well, Michael, I just wanted to let you know that, the videotape is out there, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. And like I said, we did post that to whatreallyhappened.com. Now, do you remember a while back there was this horrible tragedy where they were installing a pedestrian bridge at the Florida International University, and it wasn't even open yet, and all of a sudden it collapsed onto the roadway below, killing a lot of people, injuring a lot more people. It has now come on out that the engineers working on that bridge had discovered cracks in the structure 2 weeks before it was installed over the roadway. And according to the Miami Herald, photographs and an email unintentionally released to them by the school detail the troubling cracks found in a key concrete support truss that supported the bridge. And the cracks were found 10 days before the school's engineers put the bridge in place. We can't make what we used to make anymore. What really worries me is, as you know, we have this light rail system that's going in down here. And it's way, it's way overdue. It's way behind schedule. It's way over budget. It's already had all kinds of problems. They've had to replace the cars because the frames were found to be cracked, and it was cheaper to buy new cars than to try and repair them. And now it turns out that the engineers of that bridge that collapsed in Florida are the same engineers who were hired to design the trusses supporting the tracks above the roadway. That's not exactly a confidence builder. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the show. Back to the phones, Dee in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. This business in Syria and Iran just keeps getting better and better, doesn't it?
Oh, well, depends on your point of view. I think it's getting worse and worse.
Well, I mean that facetiously, but
yeah, okay.
This pulling out of the deal, I don't know that it would hurt them if Europe and Iran still decide they're going to go along with it. It'll hurt us worse.
Yes.
It's the constant attacking on Syria that is getting me concerned, because going back to basic analogy, we teach our kids, don't hurt a cat or hurt a dog because you're going to get bit. Don't mess with it. They're going to bite you. We keep messing or letting Israel do it. One of these days, somebody's going to get bit.
Well, I see the point that you're making here.
And they keep doing it.
Yeah, well, yes, the U.S. has been doing it. They've been doing it covertly for the most part since the end of World War II. The difference is now, because of the independent media and the internet, people are now aware of what's been going on, that these revolutions that take place in various countries like Iran and Chile weren't genuine grassroots revolts by the indigenous people. They were engineered from outside to bring about regime change in order to bring these countries' governments under the U.S. Sphere of influence. And apparently there's been another leaked memo from the White House that says that the U.S. is trying to foment another revolution in Iran after having failed back in 2009.
Another one?
Another one.
Wow, they just don't, one of these days they keep messing with these dogs or rattlesnake, they're going to get bit.
Well, I think the thinking is...
And it's going to be hard and it's going to hurt.
I think the thinking is that if they go in and covertly execute a regime change, then they're not going to come up militarily against Russia because it won't technically be an on-the-ground invasion. The problem is that if this attempt at a color revolution in Iran fails as badly as the 2009 one did, then yes, military action will follow.
Didn't they try that again in like 2013, 14, and it failed too?
No, there was...
I thought they did after that one election.
I'll have to go back.
It was like one more where they tried it.
I'll have to go back and take a look at that. But, they've all failed. The Iranian people like their government, contrary to the propaganda, and they understand. They've come to understand. The U.S. likes to mess around with their country. They learned that all the way back in 1953 when the CIA overthrew the legitimately elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh and installed the dictator, the Shah, who ruled until the Iranian Revolution of 1979.
And then you got Israel keeps on attacking them. And so far, I've heard, that they've taken the lead with Putin and not done it. But again, you can only attack and mess with somebody for so long before they turn around and get you.
Well,
and that's scary.
At some point, yes, somebody's going to reach their breaking point, and they're going to say, we can't just sit here and, be a punching bag any longer. We have to start fighting back. Obviously, Syria did that yesterday. Netanyahu tried to claim it was the Iranians. Again, he lied. But I think the only reason that Russia didn't get involved was that Israel, like Donald Trump, didn't send any weapons toward the Russian facilities and installations.
Yeah, so they're kind of helping them, but they're not. But then again, I don't know. Syria's probably too worn down to do much of anything right now, but Iran's not. And when they bite, they're going to bite hard, and it's going to hurt real bad.
Well, Syria...
And once people... They've got... They're hardliners just like we do. Parents... Iranian kids start coming home in coffins, Iranian parents are going to get really pissed. And once they let go, they're just going to let go.
Well, we've had American kids coming home in wheelchairs and boxes for 18 years now, and I'm still waiting for the American people to get upset about it.
Yeah, but I think they're a little bit different. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe they will let it just go, but I don't know for how long. But once they do, man, it's not going to be nice.
It's a very unstable situation, and it could very easily spin out of control. Again, if there's a direct attack on Iran, Russia has already pledged they will assist Iran. Now, getting on back to Syria, two factors you need to understand. First of all, Russia is sending them weapons, so they're well supplied. And the Syrian army is now battle hardened. They have been living and fighting war for 8 years, and they are not to be messed with.
No, they're still good, but I mean, I don't know if we're battle hardened or not, but I just hope they can tamp this down in some way, because you can't, I mean, sooner or later, somebody's going to reach the end.
Yes. Well, the wild card, of course, is
really nasty.
Yeah, the wild card, of course, is Israel's nuclear weapons, which are doing their job of deterring attacks by Russia or Iran, not so much Syria over the Golan. Of course, the instant Israel uses a nuclear weapon, everybody's going to know that Israel was lying all along, and the American people are going to stand up and say, okay, Israel has nuclear weapons. They've never signed the NNPT. Every single penny of U.S. financial aid sent to Israel is illegal under U.S. law, 3 U.S. laws. And we want a refund.
Yeah. That would be nice.
That would be nice. Anything else?
Yeah, but I don't, well, I don't think that as long as Europe, Russia, and China stay with the agreement, I don't know that it would do too much. It's if they pull out that could be a problem.
Yes, if the deal between the P4+1 collapses, then Iran has already said they're going to be working at getting a nuclear weapon. And that, of course, has triggered Saudi Arabia saying, well, they're going to want to get nuclear weapons. And I'm expecting that Egypt will say exactly the same thing. So pulling out of the P5+1 deal has made the nuclear proliferation problem much, much worse.
It was really dumb. It was just Trump. I don't know. He's an extreme disappointment. But what he did was just really dumb. I mean,
he did what his masters told him to do.
I can't describe the level.
He did what his masters told him to do. He did what Netanyahu wanted, what Sheldon Adelson wanted, the Israel lobby wanted. That's who's calling the shots. We're living under foreign puppet rule ourselves, and we should be no more accepting of it than the people of Iran were, or the people of Iraq, or the people of Libya, or the people of Yemen.
Hey, did you see that there was a thing on RT? Apparently the British government paid like 15 million pounds to this guy that was affiliated with Al-Qaeda and his wife.
Okay.
I guess the British sent him over to Libya like in 2001 or 2 or something, or 4. And his wife was pregnant. The guy was sent, supposedly, I guess he was tortured. I don't know. So they just apologized and paid this guy and his wife 15 million pounds. Saw it on RT this morning. I just thought that was ironic.
Well, yeah, I think it is, but it's a reminder that a lot of these people we're being told are our enemies in the war on terror are actually working for the U.S. government.
That makes it obvious, don't it?
Yeah, it does. It really, really does. I mean,
all right, Mike. You take care. You have a good day.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. As the Syrian army continues to clean out all of these bunkers and command posts for ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they keep finding all of this material support from Great Britain and the United States. All right. Another phone call. Francis in North Carolina. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Hello to you both.
Aloha.
I do have a question regarding the election scenario and so forth, but I do have a comment prior to that. It's not related. One, when human scientists start splitting or banging synthetically atoms together and creating an explosion, that is going to get the attention of intelligent life out in this galaxy, period, regardless of what life that may be. that being said, as far as your comment about the election goes and so forth, that the only reason you would vote for Trump is because Hillary is running for office in 2020 or whatever year it is. If she is not running, then who would you vote for?
I'm going to wait and see who the candidates are. I think the smartest thing the Democrats could do is run Tulsi Gabbard because she's very popular. Anyway, to get back to your original point, regardless of what we do here on Earth, if we're banging atoms and everything together, it's going to take a very long time for intelligent civilizations to hear it. We've been listening out there. We're not picking up anything. Years ago, I worked on a show for PBS called The Astronomers. And because of my prior background with NASA, I spent a lot of time with the author of the book on which the series was based. And this was when they were first starting to build what was called LIGO, the Laser Interferometry Gravity Observatory, which is supposed to be able to detect gravitational waves. And I speculated to him that we might find, once we're able to detect gravitational waves, that that's what's being used for long-range communication, because whatever mechanism conveys the force of gravity obviously travels faster than the speed of light, or black holes could not exist. So, little interesting footnote there. Anything else, Francis?
I'll give you that observation you just made. However, there are other things a lot more refined than even that. So, on that note, have fun. Take it easy. Later.
We'll do our best. All right, the phone lines are now empty again. Getting on back to the news. A little bit of positive news for people who are living in Illinois. 5 Illinois counties have now declared themselves sanctuary counties for gun owners. They're turning the liberal concept back on itself. If you can have a sanctuary county for illegal immigrants, you can have a sanctuary county for legal gun owners. And basically, they're trying to send a message to the Democratic-controlled state legislature that they're not going to enforce any more gun control laws. They're standing up on their Second Amendment rights. Now, over in Oklahoma, Governor Fallin has signed Bill 2632, which allows people to defend themselves with a firearm while attending church. And that's in response to some of these mass shootings which take place in churches to increase the sense of outrage. It's time to start shooting back. It really is. Over in Los Angeles, there's been a major protest at the Spring Street entrance of the Hall of Justice. And there was a lady there, Catherine Walker, and she had a baggie containing a lock of braided hair. And she was telling the crowd, "This is what's left of my baby." And basically the protest was against police brutality. They want reforms. They want ballot measures. They want the district attorney's resignation. Now, right now, according to the Washington Post, there have been 364 people killed by police so far this year. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here and on the subject of police brutality. Not too long ago, we reported on this incident that was captured on video where the Miami police were arresting a suspect. The suspect was not resisting. He, on his own, got down on the ground, laid out like he was directed to, was not presenting a threat. Cop got on his back and had him handcuffed when another cop ran up and just kicked this suspect in the head. And a lot of people are very outraged about that. But the police union came on out and said, the reality is the cop showed great restraint because that's all he did. I think kicking an already subdued suspect in the head who's not presenting a threat, that's not restraint. I wonder if that cop is on prescription antidepressants here. Over in Africa, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there's been a new outbreak of Ebola. And so far, it's 21 cases that they know of and 17 deaths. That's a very high lethality rate. I don't know if it's high enough to consider this to be the Mayinga strain, but it's definitely one of the nastier ones. So hopefully they'll get that under control soon. So let's talk about our volcano, because there's a lot going on. Only a few days ago, it looked like maybe things were going to calm down. No, we're back to being in an area of concern. The newest threat from Kilauea is explosive eruptions at the crater. And the last time they had one of these big explosive eruptions was over 100 years ago. And by this, I'm talking about, clouds of ash, steam, and flying rock coming out of the crater. And they're very concerned that this is going to happen. It's already happened once, not connected with the water table. Apparently part of the wall collapsed, and that triggered an event, as it were. But the U.S. Geological Survey has issued a second orange alert for Kilauea crater. And everybody's asking, is there going to be an explosion? Well, nobody really does know. They do know that if the lava goes below the water table and water is able to enter into the chambers, that there will be steam-driven explosions. Now, when this eruption first started, they closed Hawaii Volcano National Park. Then, when it was obvious that all the activity was down there at the East Rift Zone, they reopened the Volcano National Park, because that's a big draw. Tourists like to come see that. And now, because of what's happening at the main Kilauea crater, they have closed it again. And it is a reminder, just because it's a national park doesn't mean it is safe. It is an active volcano. And obviously not now, but after this all quiets down. If you come to Hawaii, it's worth going down and seeing. Claire and I have been down there. We've been right to the edge of the crater that is the problem. Certainly don't want to be there now. Over in the Estates area, the East Rift Zone, Hawaii residents are leaving offerings for the volcano goddess Pele as lava destroys their homes. There's a tremendous tradition of offerings to Pele to basically make her go someplace else. One of the most common is to just take some tea leaves, and by tea, that's a Hawaiian plant. I don't mean the drinking tea. It's a very large leaf, and you just lay it across the front of your property and hope that that will have some impact. It's a charming little story, but it's just folklore. And basically, Pele is known as the woman who devours the earth for good reason. Now, the eruptions over at Kilauea have reignited talks about the potential risk of the Yellowstone supervolcano, which last erupted about 70,000 years ago. And looking at the remains of the ancient calderas, it's overdue. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, may not happen for another 1,000 years. But it's always good to be aware of these things. Nobody was really expecting what happened here on the Big Island that particular day. One of the reasons that the residents on the Big Island don't always worry about homeowners insurance, or lava insurance rather, is because it is rare for these things to happen. But they do happen, and this one happened now. Interestingly enough, in the past, there have been efforts to try and steer and control some of these lava flows. And a lot of people are looking back at what happened in 1973 over in Iceland with the eruption of Eidfell volcano, and they were able to keep the lava from inundating the harbor by pouring seawater all over it. And I've gotten a lot of emails from people saying, can't they do that on the Big Island? Yeah, with enough long hoses they could, but the problem is that in Iceland, they were steering the lava into the ocean. And if you steer lava away from one place in the residential neighborhood, it's simply going to go someplace else. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the volcano down on the Big Island. And right now, in fact, Fox is just running a story on how workers are removing these tanks of pentane from this geothermal facility that is operating down there, because if that pentane were to be released and ignited by the lava, that would be bad news. So they're trying to get that out of here. Now, there have actually been efforts to try and tame, if you will, Madame Pelly. One example was back in 1935 when a volcanic eruption on Mauna Loa sent lava toward the town of Hilo, which is over on the northeastern coastline there. You can look it up on a map. And George S. Patton, who was then a lieutenant colonel, oversaw a U.S. Army operation where planes dropped bombs near the vent trying to open it up and steer the lava in a different direction. But the eruption ended 6 days later, and the effectiveness of Patton's operation is in dispute. Some say it had an effect, others said no, it really didn't. This according to the U.S. Geological Survey. Now, after another Mauna Loa eruption in 1942, the U.S. military bombed the channel walls of the lava flow. Again, there were no significant effects. Again, you're talking about rock. It's very massive. It's very hot. It's just burning through all the stuff. So, maybe they can get Tom Hanks to jump into the volcano. I saw that in a movie somewhere. Now, in Poland, there are officials at a Holocaust museum that claim they're being subjected to abuse, apparently triggered by Poland's controversial Holocaust speech law, which says that the Nazi camps in Poland ought to be described as Nazi camps and not Polish camps. And of course, Israel wants them to be called Polish camps because Israel wants to guilt Poland out of some money. But apparently, this issue has resulted in the harassment of these officials at a museum who are basically complying with this law. Now, this happened a couple of days ago, and it was a little bit silly. This happened in Maryland. It was got on video. Traffic ground to a halt on this highway, and when the sheriff got up there to see what was going on, he found there was a groundhog that was just running back and forth on the road, and people were smiling and looking at him and trying to edge by the little critter. And the Maryland sheriff, it's almost funny to watch. The groundhog basically charges the sheriff, and the sheriff backs up. And it's very funny, but it stops being funny because the sheriff pulls his gun and shoots the groundhog twice. Now, handling any kind of wildlife, especially when you are so much larger, is just a matter of getting on up there in its face, stomping your feet and driving it back off the side of the road into the shrubbery. But the police are just really too willing to use their firearms these days. Okay, this is a little sick. Chalk up another one for Project Veritas. They got undercover footage and documents obtained from the American Federation of Teachers Michigan affiliate office in Lake City, which revealed the union protected a teacher after accusations of sexual misconduct with a 7 or 8 year girl came on out. And this release came after a federal judge ruled in favor of Project Veritas in the First Amendment after Michigan AFT tried twice and failed twice to halt the release of the video. Well, if you don't want an embarrassing video out there, especially in this age of cell phone cameras, don't do something embarrassing. Apparently, this incident occurred sometime in 2006. It was not reported until 2013 when the victim happened to become a student of that same teacher, at which point she went to the supervisor, the superintendent, and basically spilled her guts. And the superintendent terminated the teacher. Here's where it gets interesting. Because of the union contracts, he was allowed to keep his teaching certificate. He got 6 weeks' pay and a flat buyout of $50,000. What is it about our system that we are protecting the corrupt? And here's another good one. This just came on in. This is another announcement from Judicial Watch. Apparently, records obtained from the Office of the Inspector General show this official, William Mendoza, was Obama's director of White House Initiative on American Indian and Alaskan Native Education. And apparently he had a bad habit of doing what are called upskirt pictures and videos. And apparently he was doing it at the White House on government time. And they just sort of smiled and nodded, and he got raises and promotions. And it finally came to an end when he was arrested for taking upskirt pictures on the escalators of the Washington, D.C. Metro. And this guy was being paid a lot of money. He was in a very high position. And the first thing that occurs to me is there is so much porn available for free online, as long as you watch out for the malware. Why would this guy feel like this was necessary or even appropriate behavior? And this stuff keeps on coming out. We're getting a disturbing picture of the caliber of human being that inhabits our federal government. Now, as you know, the Boy Scouts succumb to political correctness and inclusivity. They've dropped the name boy, and they're simply now the Scouts, and they're going to be admitting girls into the ranks, which may be an issue for the Girl Scouts. I noticed nobody went over to the Girl Scouts and said, you got to start letting the boys in. But it's already had a backlash. Apparently 500,000 Boy Scouts have now quit. This isn't what they signed up for. And basically, these 500,000 members are saying they will start a new organization. This political correctness is just tearing the heart out of our country. So let's talk about the world of computers, and already we're getting the booga booga. Iran is likely to launch cyber attacks on Western businesses in retaliation for Trump withdrawing from the nuclear deal, security experts warn. This is coming out of the Daily Mail. And so if the economy does collapse, they're going to blame Iran for it. Julian Assange is still cut off from the internet after his Ecuadorian embassy host severed his communications with the outside world. And apparently the concern was that Ecuador was receiving complaints from other countries that Julian Assange's posts were interfering in countries' internal affairs. And Ecuador doesn't want to get caught in the middle of that. So Assange is still cut on off. And at some point, this situation must be resolved here. Over in Berlin, there is a campaign going on to prevent Google from setting up shop after the corporation announced plans in September to build their 7th worldwide campus there. And some of the messages scrawled, the graffiti, are actually obscene, which is kind of surprising for the Berliners. And there's a French digital rights campaigner living in Berlin has set up an English language website called Blank Off Google to warn, basically get the corporation to stay away. And I think that may be because, first of all, Google has become very unpopular around the world with its own users. And second, because we keep hearing these horror stories about how employees at Google in Silicon Valley aren't making enough to pay rent. They're literally sleeping in their cars in order to be able to work at Google. And I'm sure that Berlin doesn't want to have that kind of abusive employer in their city. Now, you remember the Equifax breach? Huge amount of data was stolen. And one of the things that is being suggested that you do is freeze your credit reports, either through Equifax or any of the other companies like Experian, TransUnion, Innovis, and they will block any request to access your credit report. The problem is Equifax operates a secondary non-compliant credit bureau called National Consumer Telecommunications and Utilities Exchange on behalf of a secretive cabal of owners led by AT&T, and also including mysterious organizations like Centralized Credit Check Systems. And so the thieves can still get your credit report going through that organization. Your reports are not really being frozen. Okay, a lot of people are starting to realize the Internet of Things is not a good idea. So far, the product offerings have a 75% failure rate of just not working. People are very concerned about being hijacked by malware or being spied on using the Internet of Things. I certainly have no intention to have it in my home. Up until recently, you could clear malware out of an Internet of Things machine just by turning the gadget off and on and basically rebooting it. But there's a new strain of Internet of Things malware dubbed hide and seek, and it can live through a power cycle. It writes a copy of itself to the /etc/init.d directory in the Internet of Things device's embedded GNU Linux system, where startup programs are stored. When a device that's been infected that way is rebooted, it is immediately freshly infected. Over at Intel, they've now come on out and said that this second wave of Spectre-like CPU security flaws is not likely to be fixed for a while. It could be the third quarter before the patches come on out. 5 powerful botnets have been found exploiting unpatched GPON router flaws. The cybercrime is completely out of control, and our government seems totally uninterested in doing anything about it, unless it's their computers being attacked, and then they'll go out and do something about it. But it's open season on computer users all around the world. So, now getting on back to Los Angeles and the protests regarding police brutality, the call for the district attorney to step down. One of the issues that is angering the people is it has been uncovered that the LAPD is running what, for lack of a better word, could be called a pre-crime program, which is they're sweeping all the information they can about everybody they can into a centralized database, and they have artificial intelligence do the investigative work of making connections so that crimes can be prevented before they happen. It's pre-crime. Now, obviously, if LAPD and the other cities who are involved in this testing thought this was a good thing, they would be out there announcing it. But this was all very hush-hush, and it had to be uncovered by investigative reporters. Now, the issue's obviously going to be complex. How do you arrest somebody for a crime they did not commit? Which was an issue that was brought up in the movie Minority Report. How do you get around that issue? Along with the fact that this is obviously a violation of the Fourth Amendment. But secrecy is on the verge of extinction in our society. Now, there's another reason why this pre-crime system ought not to go forward, and that has to do with the unreliability of all of this stuff. We're seeing about all these bugs coming on out here, and apparently researchers have discovered a police breathalyzer can produce incorrect breath test results, casting doubt on countless DUI convictions. So what happened after that? The company that makes the breathalyzer brought legal action against the researchers and shut them down. And so the police are still out there with this breathalyzer, getting false positives and putting innocent people in jail. Now, a lot of people who are supporting the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, or simply critical of the government of Israel, are always talking about how they're being harassed by Israel supporters. It turns out it is a dedicated, organized operation. And the Israeli government is encouraging its supporters to engage in a cyberbullying campaign against U.S. students after they voted to divest from companies that profit from Israel's crimes. Administrators of the Aiea app began directing its users to like and share a Facebook page that was set up solely to threaten and bully student senators of George Washington University in Washington, D.C., who had voiced their support of the resolution. And of course, Israel is saying it's all anti-Semitism. And this Aiea app is the product of a partnership between Israeli think tanks, lobby groups, and Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs, which poured nearly $600,000 into this project. This is all being bought and paid for. Over in Scotland, a reactor at EDF Energy's Hunterston B nuclear power plant is going to remain offline for additional safety checks. Apparently, the core is cracked. And they're trying to figure what they can do about it. The reactor was due to go offline by 2025, but it's obviously not going to make it that long. I think the wise thing to do would be to just leave it shut down and not take the risk of another Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island or Fukushima. So as we come to the end of the show here, let's talk about human-caused global warming. Apparently, over in India, they've had a very heavy snowfall that has basically halted pilgrimages to a famous Himalayan shrine. And apparently, pilgrims have been stopped from proceeding out of concern for their safety. Over in the Blackfoot drainage area near Missoula, there's a lot of flooding going on. Why is there so much water coming into Missoula? Well, because of all the snow, the record snow in the Blackfeet Hills. And that's going to be another aspect of the fact that we are going into a cooling period. The winters will be heavier, and the springs will be wetter. And I'm sure there's somebody out there in Carbonazi land who's already trying to figure out a way to say, oh, no, the floods are caused by global warming. It's global warming. You will believe as we tell you to believe. All right, back in a few minutes for the last segment of our show. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And no, don't call because the lines are closed for the last segment of our program. And I don't even know why that particular bump is at this location in the show here. So we're still talking about human-caused global warming. Over in Kashmir, they had an intense hailstorm that was strong enough to kill over 110 animals, mostly sheep and goats. And it takes a really huge hit to kill an animal of that size. A lot of crop damage. Orchards were damaged. So no reports of any human casualties, but it was a very intense storm indeed. Now, a judge has ruled that nonprofits can sue Monsanto for misleading safety labeling of their Roundup herbicide because Monsanto basically came on out and said that glyphosate targets a particular enzyme that is in the weeds, but is not in humans, and therefore it's completely safe. But that's misleading and fraudulent because the product, in fact, chemically, it adversely affects beneficial bacteria essential to gut biome and normal bodily functions. So, good for these people who came up with that. That's all I can say. There's been another major recall of romaine lettuce, and if you get a notice about it, you should pay attention to it. It's another E. coli outbreak. It has made a lot of people very ill, and apparently it's basically causing kidneys to fail. Total number of victims so far is 150, and so you may want to steer clear of that for a little while. All right, we're coming up here on the end of the program. Basically, over at Twitter, and I have to say, this is a little tasteless. I mean, I don't like John McCain. I really don't. But he is in his final days. Nevertheless, over on Twitter, there is a trending hashtag Songbird McCain, where basically veterans who knew him in Vietnam and fellow POWs are going public saying, yeah, he cooperated with North Vietnam. He was given good treatment because he was making these Tokyo Rose type tape recordings. In fact, McCain should have been prosecuted for treason when the POWs came back home, but Richard Nixon issued a blanket pardon to all the POWs. And so McCain was never charged. Now, that's an important piece of history we have to hang on to, along with McCain's admission that he was, in fact, the person who handed that ginned up, dodgy dossier about Russia and Trump to James Comey. But he is nearing his end, and maybe I'm just getting sensitive because, you know, I am getting older. But I think we should leave him in peace for however many days he's got left. I do think it's rather tasteless for them to be doing that. Apparently, Amazon customers are complaining their packages are arriving late, and they may be getting out of Prime. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Take what you learn here, what you learn on the radio show, what you learn from the website, share it with everyone that you know. We have to basically build a public consensus against the escalation of these wars. Don't use Facebook or any other social media. Use email or direct face-to-face talks to just get that word out. This is really insane. It's time for the American people to stand up and say, no more war. All right, we'll be back tomorrow with the Lady Claire. Aloha, America.